Before we get into today's episode, just some fun announcements to be made. We will be doing an episode every day of this week, except for, I believe, Saturday. We may actually see if we can do one on Saturday as well. We got new episodes of The Wake Up all through this week, as well as Newsflash on Thursday, and the first ever episode of Uncultured, our new show about hip-hop and everything to go along with that, comes your way on Friday as well, of course, with another Newsflash episode on Sunday. And maybe we may be able to carry some more episodes out through the rest of the summer if that is something that could happen. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that. But without further ado, let's start the show. Hello everyone, welcome to an all-new episode of Newsflash. Great to be with you here today. And of course, we will be covering a lot today about a very sad topic. Back-to-back bursts of gun violence in El Paso and Dayton have stunned America and killed 34 people. Take a look at some of the Republican responses, play a fun game, not so fun, of who said it, the El Paso shooter or Fox News. Take a look at the Second Amendment case made by the New Republic for a possibility of gun control, why we can no longer really ignore Trump's role in inspiring these mass shootings. I hate to say it, but the numbers and the facts on this, they add up. Take a look at Neil deGrasse Tyson's response to this, and we'll talk about, see if we can fit in a fun story to kind of end the day as well about what's going on with the Democratic Party. But of course, we have to start at the top with Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas. Very, very sad, because on Sunday, Americans woke up to news of a shooting rampage in an entertainment district in Dayton, Ohio, where a man wearing body armor shot and killed 9 people, including his own sister. Hours earlier, a 21-year-old with a rifle entered a Walmart and killed 20 people. In a country that has become really numb to men with guns opening fire in schools, concerts, and in churches, the back-to-back bursts of gun violence in less than 24 hours were enough to leave the public stunned and shaken. The shootings ground the 2020 presidential campaign to a halt and reignited a debate on gun control and called into question the increasingly angry words directed at immigrants on the southern border in recent weeks by right-wing pundits and President Trump. And people definitely are really not happy about this. Like, we have heard so much about the need for gun control, the need to stop this problem, but it seems like, again, stop me if you've heard this before. It's the same kind of back and forth that never ends. I feel like I'm saying this. I've said this before. I've heard other people say this before. You, if you follow the news at all, have definitely heard other people say this before. And it's very, very disturbing to think that this will be such a big problem that really never seems to want to end. New York Times article here said, with a quote from Terrian Foster, saying, quote, "It's outrageous. He works in accounting and lives near Kansas City, Missouri, where he was out shopping at a farmer's market near downtown on Sunday afternoon. It's really sad because I feel like you can't go anywhere and be safe. I'm 50 years old, and I didn't think I'd be alive to see some things that are going on today." It's absolutely right, because it's just the reality. It's not even that political anymore. It is simply the reality of the situation where you cannot go anywhere and be safe. Because, like, these things have happened at garlic festivals. Like, once a garlic festival goes on, you don't know where it could be next. It's unbelievable to think about what could happen. Because if you go to the store, you could get, these things have happened everywhere. They're just as American as apple pie and baseball and the 4th of July, whatever, fireworks. Because it is it's 250 times it's happened this year. It's insane. Almost as, there's been probably, mass shootings that have happened nearly, this year, think about it, there have been 216 days. Today is the August 4th, is the 216th day, and there have been 251 mass shootings. I mean, it is insane to think, and we totally have. We become absolutely numb to them. It's hard not to when they happen so freaking often, but just something has to be done. It's hard to ever imagine that it could ever happen, like, because it feels so crazy. Like, I know I go through my life, I don't think about mass shootings except for when they pop up in my life. And when I hear about them, when I think about it, and when I see something that, like, oh, this is a fact that a mass shooting or mass shooting actually happens, which, as we know, happens a lot. Like, it's not something that when I think about, like, I get in the car, I go to somewhere, I don't think about it. But that, and I think that really is a large part of why we don't hold our elected officials to kind of a tougher line on this, because we're all outraged, but we don't think of the car, we don't get in the store thinking, okay, that this is a very likely chance that a mass shooter could be around any corner, when really statistically we should be thinking like that. We should be thinking that our politicians are actually failing us by failing to keep us safe from these mass shooters. They're coming in at any point. How have they not been stopped? They've been happening forever now, and they happen so damn often. Why hasn't there been a special session? Like, this is not this is an absolute crisis, whatever is happening here. And the fact that, because we don't, like, it's not something that occupies a permanent place in our minds until it happens to you, obviously, which it's happening again to more and more people all the time, and it's not something that you think of, and that is why nothing really, I think, gets done about it. I mean, obviously, that's why we don't get angry at our politicians. I think there's a different reason as to why nothing ever gets done. It's because a lot of times there's incentive, especially in Republicans, to never want to do anything about it. Because A, it didn't fall in with their political beliefs, it hurts their chance of getting elected, and B, there are many, many different financial interests at play that no one really knows about from the NRA, which is getting closer and closer to going out of business every single solitary day, and gun manufacturers who pay and donate to these politicians to make sure to keep this whole thing going and to protect the rights and don't stigmatize guns in America, because all those few words that our founding fathers wrote, that we'll get into actually a little bit later in the show, about the right to bear arms and all of that. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It is outraged. And the shootings, the New York Times article again here, they prompted Republicans, including Mr. Trump, to condemn the government's actions and offer support to the people of Dayton and El Paso. And I mean, again, you could call this, like, again, it's the mental health idea that is, again, it's so dangerous, it's so misleading, and it's really what the Republicans are using to make sure that there's no action taken on this issue, because it's not mental health. Again, we'll talk about it. It's the gun violence, and it's also something much deeper, especially in El Paso. We don't know very much about the Dayton shooter and what his motives are. And as soon as we can, probably tomorrow, somewhere in the day tomorrow, maybe even later tonight, we can get in time for the wake up in the morning. Like, we will be able to find out more about what caused this guy to do this. And that should be, I think, very, very interesting, because you don't know, because it'd be interesting to see, like, who was at play here. Because we know in El Paso, it was a white nationalist who was far right. I mean, I say he was a Trump supporter in that he wasn't explicitly kind of a Trump supporter. Like, it wasn't a central part of his identity, but it was definitely a pillar of his identity. Like, he had these views, and the climate that was, I think, created under the Trump presidency really, really incubated them and made them a lot stronger. Because he was 16, I think. I read on Twitter, I think Mehdi Hassan, who we're going to read about a little bit later in the show, he was 16 when Trump started his candidacy, came down the escalator, all that. And, like, you have to imagine the climate that he got into. I mean, there was definitely other factors. It wasn't all Trump, but the fact that Trump gave way undisputedly to giving these nationalists more airtime, these white nationalists, these racists, these white supremacists, giving them way more airtime, giving them way more exposure to their ideas. That is what built this monster that we see today. And it is far more of a threat than anything any immigrant or any Islamic terrorist could throw at us, because it's right here, and most of the time it gets ignored by 90% of our government. You got to look to people, like the only people who are doing it are people like AOC who are raising alarms. There are people of color. I mean, they're not, and they're kind of outsider voices, even though they are elected. They don't represent a kind of consensus of government. They're not figureheads of government. They're figureheads of kind of rebellion and kind of insurgency. But so it doesn't really seem like to the average person who's well informed about the crisis that is white supremacy and kind of stochastic terrorism that takes place in our country, like that can seem like the and it's a obviously factually correct assertion to make that the government is totally uninformed, not misinformed, but they just don't give a shit about this whole epidemic of white terrorism. Democrats urge Congress to take action and pass stricter gun laws, obviously with responsibility of the people we serve to act. Speaker Nancy Pelosi said in a statement, residents of El Paso were on edge and grimly aware of a manifesto posted online. And again, this is where it gets political here, that the authorities said was written by the suspect, Patrick Crucius, who is in police custody. The manifesto spoke of a Hispanic invasion of Texas and described an imminent attack by the writer and railed against immigrants. A manifesto was also posted on 8chan, which now the site's creator is calling for it to be shut down. I think, yeah, obviously, literally every mass shooter has something on here. Like every mass shooter with a manifesto, every like white terrorist. You could do so much good work by shutting that out. Site. Just it's crap. It's not good. Federal investigators in El Paso said they were treating the massacre at the Walmart that wounded another 27 on Saturday morning. Excuse me. As an act of domestic terrorism, and prosecutors said they're also considering federal hate crime charges. They were also considering federal gun charges that would carry the death penalty. We are going to conduct a methodical and careful investigation with a view towards those charges, said John Bash, the United States Attorney for Western District of Texas, and who said he had been consulted with William Barr, the Attorney General. In Bellbrook, a quiet suburb of Dayton, that residents described as a utopia, the typical Sunday morning peace was disrupted by police and news media who swarmed the cul-de-sacs and sidewalks of the neighborhood where Connor Betts, the 24-year-old suspect, is believed to have lived. Brad Howard, who known Betts since before kindergarten, rode the bus with him to school for years, opened his phone and saw the news of his classmate on Sunday morning. It was just another one of those things, he said. It was just a kick in the teeth. Theo Gainey, who lived 10 years down the block from the Bettses, and was a year ahead of Connor Betts in school, remembered him as a bit of an outcast, ostracized in large part because of threats he made at school that got him into serious trouble. And I mean, if you're listening to maybe older, just any memory of any social situation, I think we're hearing that this guy also into the newsroom now. He got arrested for having quote unquote a rape list while he was in school. He got arrested on the school bus for the threats, said Gainey, who added that he was on the bus himself when it happened. He recalled Betts being a freshman or sophomore at the time. Gainey said that he did not remember the specifics of the threats, but said that Betts had to leave school for the rest of the year. When he returned, the threat thing followed him, and people didn't want to hang out with him. Not very surprising. His motive is unclear as of now. Looking to learn a little bit more about it. Betts died during the shooting, though. And some details did kind of appear to emerge on Saturday as kind of the new information about this came out. Yeah, so I mean, apparently he went to a community college in the Dayton area and was majoring in psychology, which is kind of, knowing what's going on here, probably a pretty creepy thing to be majoring in. He had been working at a gas station and was registered to continue classes in the upcoming fall semester. He was charged in May 2016 with operating a vehicle while under the influence in 2015, and a ticket said he had a blood alcohol level of 0.91 over the legal limit of 0.8. Obviously, he pleaded guilty the next year to a lesser charge of having physical control of a vehicle while under the influence. So witnesses of the shooting, which occurred in the early morning hours of Sunday described a scene, obviously, of horror and chaos. So this early, like 1 a.m.,